it's not even that if I was to do it because I'm currently doing it. It's like I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to go and understand, like, talking to other people, understanding different
Mm-hmm.
areas of like tech, whether it's going and learning about Scrum or learning about sprints or learning about cybersecurity. Like everything is right there and it's all at your
Mm-hmm.
fingertips. It's not, you don't have to pay for the tuition anymore. You know what I mean? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's currently like to me, I wouldn't necessarily say I'd go back, but I'll go and continue doing what I'm doing right now.
Is it a tech podcast? Well, technically, yes. This is the show for current and future techies who are curious about exploring the world of tech. You'll get to hear from exciting guests, highlighting the diversity of roles and careers within the space, how you can get started, but also the life that comes along with it before, during, and after. My name is Stella, and this is the Technically Yes podcast. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Technically Yes podcast. I'm your host, Stella, and I'm super excited to be here today. Not only am I excited because I have a woman on the pod today, which is very exciting for me, obviously. Big shout outs to women in tech, but also she's a triple threat. She's a designer, she also works in marketing, and she does development, which is like, yeah, just extremely dope. And what's really fun about today's episode is like, I feel like I don't know that much about you. Like we have mutual friends. I've met you. I know you work in tech. Like we've connected a bit on like the basics. But I'm super excited to hear a little bit more about your story and yeah, kind of how you got here. So thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Honestly, like you said, we've known each other through mutual friends, so it's also for me too, like super discovery.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's super exciting. So, Muriel, so everyone who knows, Muriel's here on the pod today, and tell us a little bit about you. Like, uh, I know you work in, obviously, like I said, you're the triple threat, right? So I know you more from like a marketing perspective and a design perspective. But tell us a little bit about like your story and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, my story is interesting because I always tell people that I just happen to be the like a luck of the draw. Because at this point, like when I was in high school, I did not know where I wanted to go. It was like a really weird time frame in terms of like like tech and like what was tech. Because I remember like Facebook and Instagram, that wasn't even a thing really. Like Facebook was major, but
Mm-hmm.
Instagram was just starting in 2012.
Yeah.
And I just knew I loved art and I loved being super creative. But obviously, from an Asian background, my parents always wanted me to go into something, engineering and nursing or like doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a real big thing for me to say I
Yeah.
want to go into a creative space.
Yeah.
So I kind of like winged it going into university, and I just happened to fall on a program called industrial design, and that's at
Nice.
Carleton. And honestly had no idea what this program was. I just knew people said, you know what, the architecture program at Carleton's amazing, but industrial
Mm-hmm.
design's even more, but nobody knows about it. It's something that like Canadians don't always see here. It's very much
Right.
seen in Europe and in the States, but not at
Mm-hmm.
all in Canada. And it wasn't until I actually got accepted and started my schooling that I found out that around like 2,000 to 3,000 people apply and only 50 get in.
Oh, wow.
So Carleton's super, super competitive for this, and I had no idea.
Wow.
And when I went into school, it was all about product development. It was about creating products, whether it's a service, a product, like something physical, something like wearable, something like a car. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone in my program went into all different sorts of fields in design. And since day one, I kind of was always into like furniture. So furniture was a
Nice.
heavy spot for me. My dad always did like renovations in the house. As my background, it's just constantly in renovations for
Yeah.
me.
I love
So
that.
that's kind of like where I started with like furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And then in school, they kind of taught us because at that time, Shopify was just starting. So when
Nice.
Shopify was just starting, we were actually in the Shopify like headquarters at the time in Ottawa, and they were heavily pushing us into the UX UI space. They're trying to show us like what is a product that isn't physical and actually part of web development and like, what is that? Because at that
Mm-hmm.
time, Shopify wasn't really like they knew what they were going to do, but they weren't nowhere near what we're seeing today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was really cool kind of having to understand like how does an app work? How does a computer work? How does, like a website sells you? And that's where the marketing for me started to grow because it's like, you're thinking about the users on the computer and how are they working with it. It's kind of like a house in my mind where it's like you enter into a door, how do you move through the house? How is the
Yeah.
flow? And that's
Yeah.
what kind of like led me into like a marketing UX UI designer like area. Um,
Nice.
that's kind of like top level of where it kind of went from like my background in like, housing and like
Yeah.
renovations to like tech. And now I'm in the space that I'm at. And just as an overview, I'm a I just changed my position. So I used to be a product design and development manager at a company called Man of Parts, and then
Nice.
I'm now the marketing I am the marketing digital manager at that same company, but overseeing all sister companies. So pushing all websites,
Okay.
pushing all products, and making it all to market, basically.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love that. So yeah, I love that you said like being part of Shopify from the beginning, like Shopify being a Canadian company. I mean, we hear like now it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like you walk down the Toronto, like downtown, you see them along the skyline. So they've grown so big, but to like be able to see them from the start, from the ground up is pretty dope. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
honestly, it was so interesting because at that time too, the workspace, it was also interesting because as I was like, like I'm interiors, um, they were such a different world. Because at that time too, tech was nowhere near like, having all the fun like shops inside like your office space, the way
Yeah.
that they're interacting with each other. Like there's bars, there's restaurants, and
Yeah.
it's like this whole
Yeah.
community. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, it was such a
Yeah.
weird space for us, but it was the start of it all. So,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. My friend works for Shopify and he was at the offices just a couple weeks ago and he took videos. And I was like, okay, we have some perks at my office, but I was like, this is next level. Like, it's
oh
really cool.
yeah,
That's
it's
so
so
fun.
cool.
So tell me a little bit about so UX UI for someone that is not in tech and doesn't understand, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so UX UI is actually really interesting, and especially for like me and my mind of just design and users,
Yes.
um, they work hand in hand. And oftentimes, a lot of times people think I just want an interface, but if an interface doesn't have the experience, they don't work well together. You're going to have a lot of failed movements through the site, through the app, through a service realistically. And what
Yeah.
it really means is UI is your user interface and UX is your user experience. So the UI has to be really functional, but at the same time, it really needs to understand how a person is going to experience the site. So for me, it's a lot about how do I make a site go to the end where someone's going to purchase the product? And that's basically the, again, overview of like what UX and UI is. And
Yeah.
it's quite interesting because everybody uses a computer differently. And that was the one thing that, like school kind of taught me as a designer that think of everybody as a dumb person. You need to tell them how to
It's so
do
true.
things
Yeah.
because like you can't just I think there's like that TikTok or that meme where the dad's like telling the son like tell me how to make a sandwich and like little boy's like yeah put the knife into the peanut butter and he just drops it in like that's what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
it's like people
Yeah.
don't know how to use a site and that's why good design and good experience design is going to make a site make it or break it.
Nice, nice. Oh, I love that so much. And yeah, it's so true. I find when I first started off, I didn't have a good understanding of like the user experience side, right? So for me to look at a design and to be able to build it or take wireframes and build it out was very easy. But then when it comes down to like the functionality aspect, like how does this actually make sense for the user? Are there way too many steps to get from point A to point B, right?
Yep.
How can we reduce those and actually ensure that people end up buying the product or the service or utilizing the app in the way it's supposed to be used, right? Because a lot of times we have
100%.
our own idea of what we want to be done, but the user, the person that's using the app every day is like, this is so redundant and so stupid. Like, why are we even doing this?
100%. And the
Yeah.
craziest part that people don't also understand, it's not only like what the developer's thinking, it's not what the designer's thinking, it's
Yeah.
also what the business is thinking. And oftentimes you're working with businesses that are maybe even just 15 years old, and
Yeah.
they just don't understand the concept of going from point A to point Z.
Yeah.
So it's understanding the brand and the identity and also the
Hmm.
marketing of it to say, yeah, this is exactly what needs to go. But to them, they're like, well, I don't like it like that because that's not what we do. So it's a
Exactly.
lot of butting of
Yeah.
head and a lot
Yeah.
of like, okay, how do we make everyone happy
Mm-hmm.
here?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So, question for you. Being in the field that you're in, what are some common myths about your field or about your expertise, would you say?
I would say there's a few things because, there's always everybody at this point wants to be a product manager. And I
Yes.
think it's like a very populated space. And
Mm-hmm.
product manager and project managers are very different, in my opinion. I think that
Mm-hmm.
product managers really have to understand marketing, they need to understand development, and they
Mm-hmm.
also need to understand business. And
Yeah.
those are the real, like, heavy things that you really to understand to be a successful product manager. And I think that because it's such a new space too, it's really hard to always prove to other people that this position works. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you really do need to make it work. And the other thing that's like a big myth is that UX isn't necessarily needed, but UX is
Mm-hmm.
heavily needed. It is something
Yeah.
that really influences, and you're going to see a lot of, like failed attempts on your site because you don't have proper UX, right?
Oh yeah.
You'll have a lot of abandoned carts. You'll have a lot of people that just fall off. They are only on it for like maybe 2 minutes and just they
Mm-hmm.
don't even get to the point that you want it to go to. And sometimes some people just miss the point completely, and it's because the experience on the site is frustrating and they don't want to move
Mm-hmm.
ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so true. And I mean, a bad experience, like I always tell my clients, right? Because I freelance on the side, and I always say you have to think about like the more difficult you make it for them, the easier it gets for your competitors. Because once they
Exactly.
like, if they drop off of your site, they're going somewhere else, and it's just like a Google search away, right? Like it doesn't take long to find a competitor anymore. So you have to ensure that like make the experience as good as possible, so that they stay, so they stick around, and they keep coming back, right? Because the last thing you want, like I there's nothing like reviewing a heat map and seeing like 70% of people dropping off at the exact same spot and you're like, oh my God, this is I wish we fixed this
Yes,
earlier. I wish you paid attention to this, right?
100%.
Yeah, so I completely agree.
And it's good that you even brought up heat maps. That's another thing that's also actually a myth as well, is that people tend to think, oh, my site's good. I don't need any analytics. But
Mm-hmm.
analytics and like those types of tests, like A/B testing, group testing, heat maps, all those different things, if you really wanted your website or your product to be the next level, you need to review those data and you need
Yeah.
to understand where are they going so that you could continue to make sales.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really important. I find oftentimes people don't understand the amount of like, I say this in previous episodes, like the amount of hats that you wear when you work in the space. Whereas like you
Yeah.
can just be a developer, right? But then it's like you still have to have the marketing skills. You still have to have the data analytics skills and all that stuff to be more well-rounded because clients often don't understand how many people are involved in the process, or like when
Hmm.
people that are not in tech, they look at certain tech companies and they're like, why do you have this department and that department? Like that is such a waste of money. And it's like, no, if you want it to be like a well-run machine, you need to have these people in place because that in itself is like, to be a data analyst is like a whole job. Like I sit in on some data meetings and I'm like, how are you guys? Like this is a lot, right?
It's a lot because like sometimes it's just numbers and numbers and numbers
Yeah.
and you kind of sit there like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But when you actually start seeing the changes and like the
Mm-hmm.
growth after it, you're like, okay, I get why you did
You're like,
that. You know what I
this
mean?
makes sense.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. They pay
exactly.
you for a reason. Like, yeah, you belong
Yeah.
here. Totally. So, what would you say is like one of the most challenging parts of your job? Like now that you've actually, sorry, how long have you been in the industry? You said since like university, right? But like from
Yeah.
like what you're doing right now currently, how long has that been?
So I don't know if it's because of my family trait of everybody just loves to work.
Yeah.
But I
Fair.
would say that because I'm not really always so physical with work, it's mostly like mental doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do a lot of both a day job and my side hustle. So
Yes.
my day job is pretty much, I started doing that around 5 years ago.
Nice.
But my side hustle goes between home renovations and home flips within the GTA to like actually creating brands and pushing them to market. So I would say that's been maybe around like 7 to 8 years of me just working with different
Amazing.
people and like trying to get people to, find their brand and their identity. I think that both a home and a business has a huge identity to who you are and where you're moving towards. And I think that's why people like working with me because it ends up being like, it's not just a business, it's not just a product, it's something that they feel passionate about and that they're willing to continue to keep moving forward with what I give them. So yeah, in my area, I would say I'm around 8 years in the industry.
Nice. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So in that, yeah, in saying that, so what would you say is the most challenging part?
I would say one of one of the most challenging parts that I've like dealt with was definitely being a woman in color and also being really young. So I started this like right when I came out of university. So gaining like that experience was really difficult. Like as they always say, they're looking for a 5 year to 10 year
Oh my
experienced person
gosh.
for a position like mine. And it was very difficult to say, this is something that I want to do. And on top of that, as I earlier said, like Shopify was just starting at that point, right? So everybody wanted to get into the tech space. There was so much opportunity in the tech that it became very saturated. So trying to prove to yourself and to prove to other people has been difficult. And also being able to say, here's my portfolio, because not every day, especially after you graduate university, are you
Yeah.
always updating your portfolio, right?
Yeah.
Especially as a designer, it's
Yeah.
like I've done the work, like just look at my
Yeah.
stuff, but it's
Yeah.
really hard to really show that. Um, and oftentimes too, a lot of like in my industry, I work for luxury furniture, and it is a lot of older white men, and at the same time, it's kind of like, it's a learning process. And I think for me, it's not something that I want to say that as a woman, I don't get paid, or as a woman, I'm not like getting as much opportunity. For myself, I love to create the opportunities and prove it to them. And at first, it was a little like, oh, like, who is she to say anything? But then now they're understanding that I do understand my range of knowledge, whether it's
Yeah.
product development to tech. And I think as of right now, it's quite interesting to see that a lot of women are now gravitating towards me and understanding like how do I get more into like content development or using of Photoshop or understanding of like tech things. And people come to me now to understand how do I do code, even though I have no idea how to do code. I just,
Yeah.
like I'm able to read things and then developers could trust me. And I think that
Yeah.
trust was my most difficult part. But at this moment, I feel like they could trust me. I'm in a good space.
Nice. That's amazing. Honestly, that's so nice to hear. And just for the fact that you have like created that space for yourself, right? Like regardless of the doubts that you might have in the industry and it's like you said, creating those opportunities. I think that's so important. I feel all too often it's so easy to be like, yeah, that's not available or like there's no posting for this or no one's really approached me with this opportunity or this chance or what have you. But it's like, yeah, you just got to kind of find those on your own. And there are tons of
Exactly.
opportunities out there. That's the other thing too. It's just like find those gaps and
Yeah,
figure out
and
how
it's
you can be of
also
service.
exactly, and it's also like not listening to some other people that are saying that they're not there because they are there. Like you
Yeah.
need to ask, you need to get up there, you need to be forward, and you need to be like have a lot of courage to literally tell people in management like I'm capable and like
Yeah.
here's here's everything that I have for you, and this is all the things that I've proven. Here's like actual numbers, and they
Yeah.
end up like, they to my surprise, I was very surprised when I first said, I want to raise and I want to go in this field. They're like, yeah, sure. I was so nervous going into that
Yeah.
office. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna be that girl. I'm gonna be like, whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
But walking in and saying it, I was like literally in sweat. And then when they
Yeah.
just said it so easily, yeah, absolutely, you could do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just sit back down then. Like, it's like, okay, I guess
Like,
now
okay,
what do I
thanks for your time.
do?
I love that
Exactly.
though because it's like it's so true. It's like ask, right? Like so many
Hmm.
opportunities get passed up because we don't ask. Like we don't take the
Yeah.
time to just see like is there availability here? Do you trust me enough to do this? Because a lot of times it's like they just want to see like are you willing to put yourself out there? Are you willing to try
Yeah.
hard? Are you willing to put the effort in, right? A lot of times we're just so afraid to even like put ourselves out there and yeah, even ask for that opportunity. So I love that you are able to even just say that here on this platform, that it's like it's so important to like not be afraid to just put yourself out there. What's the worst thing that can happen? They say, okay, maybe you're
Exactly.
not ready for it. Maybe it's another 6 months. Maybe they have to consider someone else. But like a lot of times we are like more qualified than we think we are, right?
Exactly. And the crazy part is too, it's like I think people should also stop thinking of like even like you just said, in 6 months or where you're not ready yet. It's actually a great opportunity to say, okay, so what do I have to do to make it
Exactly.
show to you that I'm capable of doing it? What are my goals? What are my like milestones that I could,
Yeah.
set for myself so that I could go through the next level? And oftentimes they do it. And even
Yeah.
then, it's also understanding that they don't even know that this is what you want. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
sometimes you just need to ask because they don't know that that's the area that
Yeah.
you thrive in and that
Yeah.
you want to be in. And that's exactly what I did in this industry. And I think that's why being so young and ranking up quickly, they were very like, sure, why not? Because I was
Yeah.
very forward with it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly, exactly. No, you're so right. And it's like everyone wants to see that effort. Like we all want to work with people that are like happy at work, that want to show up and do the job. So it's like if you're excited about doing something and being somewhere, they're going to be like, okay, well, why not? Like give it to someone that actually wants to be here versus someone else that's kind of just like coasting and showing up
Yeah,
half-assed every day. So I love that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So for someone that wanted to get started, like I'm sure you get approached all the time. I mean, people are probably always constantly asking you about what it is that you do and how to get into the industry. But for someone that's kind of like brand new, they don't really have a lot of tech experience, but they want to do what you do. Where would you tell them to get started?
Um, it's interesting because actually one of my newest hires at the company, I personally didn't hire her, but she was hired and she wanted to do exactly that, like just change in the to a different career and she wasn't sure what it was. And after talking to her, I realized like, there's opportunity if you ask for it, like I said before, and it's also being able to show people, like where do you know this information in terms of like if it's in marketing, like how did you learn it? Where did you learn it from? Like always read books, go to different like, different courses because there's so many courses online nowadays that you could
Yeah.
easily learn how to code. You could easily learn how to market something. There's so many different forums that you could easily go into. And it's all about networking as well. It's not necessarily just saying, hey, my name is Muriel and like here's all my information, but it's actually having genuine conversation with people in tech, because somebody knows someone all the time. So it's always just about talking to each other, asking questions, just even asking them, like one of my favorite things to tell people is like, how can I help you? Like
Yeah.
that's something I love introducing myself with. It's like, hi, I'm Muriel. What do you do? How can I help you? And to me, I think that might have been like me in my server days where it's just
Yeah.
like, what do you want?
I
But
love
it
that.
ends up
I
being
used to
like
serve
them.
too.
Exactly, right? It's just like, I don't want to serve you food, but I actually
Yeah.
want to serve you something that's
Yeah.
like benefiting you.
Yeah.
And I think that's just who I am, where I just love to know what you're doing and like where are your pain points so that I could maybe guide you or we could talk things out or you feel more inspired. It's all about a conversation to me. And I think
Yeah.
even talking to a few people trying to move into this field, it's having a conversation with somebody and seeing if it's even fit for you.
Exactly. I completely 100% agree. I feel like that's the one thing when people come up to me, I always say, we don't really know. It's hard to really know what a role is until you've really talked to people within that space, right? So I always say,
100%.
have that conversation. Ask them what they do. What does their day look like, right? But then also
Hmm.
ask them, like you said, how can I be of service? How can I help you? Because you'll get so much from those conversations versus just like, here's my LinkedIn QR code, add me here, and then you're like
100%.
sliding in their DMs because you saw a posting on the company job site or whatever. I find it's very important to really get a true understanding of what people do and what it
Hmm.
looks like. Because a lot of times, like, we'll see a job description or we'll have an idea of what it is, but it can be far from that a lot of times, right? Because the day to day can
100%.
be so different from what they're
Yeah.
actually doing. So, yeah, I completely
Yeah,
agree.
and also a lot of companies, especially if they don't have the tech like space within the company already, they don't even know what they're looking for. So exactly like you said, that job description can be super vague. It could be
Yeah.
super broad. By the time you get in there, you're literally just the person that's going through data, and that's not
Yeah.
nowhere near what you wanted to do in the
Yeah.
first place, right? Um, and I also think too, just to add on, is that even if you go in and say, okay, I'm going to go into Google Garage and I'm going to look at different different courses I can take. Great. That's the first step. But at least try one or two of them and see if you're even interested. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because at the end of the day, it's like you might go in it, it's only like 5 minutes. At least you're not spending thousands of dollars into
Yes.
university or college. You're
Yeah.
just taking a test into it saying, do I like it? Do I not? Maybe it's not it for you, and you see something else that's kind of in the same line. I have a friend of mine that's literally going into one thing. He initially wanted to do everything data analysis. And then a few minutes later, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go into cybersecurity. And
Yep.
because he went into that cybersecurity, he started to realize like they actually relate to each other. And
Yeah.
there's so many different things that it's like, oh, like I could actually maneuver through it, but I like cybersecurity
Yes.
over data
Or like the
analysis.
data side, yeah, yeah. There's so
Exactly.
much overlap, which is so fun, and it's so interesting because as you continue to because as I started as a developer, right, and then
Hmm.
as I was kind of getting out of that, I did a lot of product related stuff at my job,
Hmm.
but then during that time, I was also taking a data course, right? So I was like, okay, let me check this out. And then during that data course, I was like, okay, this is not my favorite thing either. However, I'm going to get the certificate and try something else. But you notice
Yep.
as you go through it, even when like I did a UX course, I'm like, this is obviously so important because as a developer, I need this. I need this knowledge. But then as you move into other spaces, you just realize there's so much overlap, and you kind of just have to find that soft spot or like that nook and cranny where you kind of fit in, right? Because it'll be like there's
Exactly.
so many different holes, there's so many different spaces in which you're like, okay, this is not the perfect fit, but then you fall into like one course and you're like, okay, well
Always.
actually I love this. I love this. It's so similar
Yeah.
but so different.
Exactly. And the cool part is once you start jumping into a bunch of different things, you end up finding the language of tech. And that's what I was also telling a lot of people coming into the tech world. If you know a little bit of development, a little bit of design, a little bit of this, a little bit of that,
Yeah.
you could have a full conversation and it's more collaborative and you get to get the job done quicker
Yeah.
and also 100 times better because you guys all understand each other.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So in your opinion, to do what you do, what do you think is like the biggest personality or like the best personality trait that someone should have? Or like what's a strength that one should really possess in order to be good at what you do?
I think, let me think about this.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, Personality trait, I think, is just open, to be very like open and interested to hear what other people have to say, and to also know that you're not always in the right. No matter how much knowledge you have, it's not you dictating what is going to come out of like new product that you're making. Somebody might use a chair completely the wrong way, but it ends up being a better way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like one of my best examples that I love always talking about is how YouTube used to be, it was actually a dating app, right? And they use it in a completely different way. I don't know if you did you know this? No?
No, I did not know that. Tell me more.
So YouTube, from my understanding, was supposed to be a dating app where you were supposed to put videos of yourself talking about yourself. So it's kind of like a YouTube, right? So your TV.
Yeah, yeah.
And it ended up being something that you were supposed to like say, hey, I'm Muriel, I'm interested in XYZ, blah, blah, blah. It was supposed to be a space for people to like, introduce themselves. But
That's
then it ended up
hilarious.
being people putting on stupid videos and like
Yeah.
information videos and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. And then people are
Yeah.
like, oh, this is not even the platform that it's supposed to be, but it still has the same context.
Yeah.
So the pivoting side of things and understanding that my idea is great.
Yeah.
No, like your idea is probably trash. It might be great, but it's trash
Yeah.
because someone else is
Yeah.
going to come in and completely
And tell you what
mess
it's
with
supposed
it.
to be. Oh my God, I love
Exactly.
that.
So
That's
I think it's just
hilarious.
being able to pivot. That's the biggest
Yeah.
thing. Like ego has to be down and the pivoting has to be real. Like you
Yeah.
can't, your way is not my way when you're in
Oh
my
my God.
position.
That's hilarious. Oh my God. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's so fun. I did not know that.
Yeah,
But you
it's
know what? It
interesting.
actually just reminds me it's the fact that like I always tell my clients when we're building out something is like we always have to focus on the MVP Make
Yep.
sure it's as lean as possible. Let's just get it out because your user will always tell you what your product's supposed to be. Because you
Yep.
might, as an executive, have this big vision for how you want your product to work and function, and you're like, it's going to be like this in 5 years, and it's like, no, no, no. Let's just like the bare minimum. Like, what do we need to like bring it to market? And then let the users do the rest because we're going to do the user research. We're going to get the feedback. And it's so funny because YouTube obviously did that. And they were like,
Yep.
wait, this dating app thing's not going to work. And like, look at YouTube now. It's just insane what's happened, right?
Exactly.
So that's so
Exactly.
funny.
And I think it's crazy because is like you said, clients have such a crazy idea and it's
Yeah.
having to set those expectations and say, let's peel back the onion. Like, where is the core? What are you doing? How are you getting there? And
Yeah.
just know that that core value will always stay the same. It's gonna
Yeah.
have to pivot. It's gonna go
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you got to be adaptable, especially if you want to grow and scale and do
exactly.
all the things. If you want it to stay small and exactly to your vision, like cool, that's fine too, but like we might not have the same traction that you might want. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's dope. I love that. So, if you, with everything that you know today, like everything that you've been through, all your challenges, everything, is there anything that you'll go back and you're like, I would totally do this different if I had the chance?
Mm, I'm gonna sound super cheesy, but no, because I think that every path that I've taken so far, whether it's like changing positions in a company or taking on new clients, it's all been like really great paths to learn from. And there's hasn't been any like feeling, not that it's like regret or something I would change, because even
Yeah.
for me, like I said, I got the luck of the draw to go into industrial design. I had no idea what that was. And
Yeah.
then, of course, because in the time frame that I was doing industrial design, it was also the start of tech. At first, I went into the furniture side and I brought back to tech because at the end of the day, we have to sell the furniture online. Like,
Yeah.
especially with the pandemic and everything, like, there's just so many things you have to learn from in all of your paths so that you could understand where to go next.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think if I was to do anything, and it's not even that if I was to do it, because I'm currently doing it, it's like I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to go and understand, like, talking to other people, understanding different areas of like tech, whether it's going and learning about Scrum or learning about sprints or learning about cybersecurity, like everything is right there and it's all at your fingertips. It's not, you don't have to pay for the tuition anymore. You know what I mean? So I think that's currently like to me, I wouldn't necessarily say I'd go back, but I'll go and continue doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, like keep making it better as you go. Nice. Good for
Exactly.
you. I love that. So, another question I really want to ask because I feel like as a woman in tech, I've definitely had my fair share of like struggles, to say the least. Even just the other day, I was talking to someone, and it's like I find oftentimes I get belittled, and people assume a lot about what it is that I do. Like I manage a team of 5 people currently, and I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, "Oh, you must be doing X, Y, Z," and basically they were saying that I was in marketing, and to them that was an insult, but I was like, you don't I don't that's not even an insult because I'm like, you don't really even understand, like marketing is a beast of in its own.
It
So the
is.
fact that you're trying to like insult me by saying that I'm in marketing like just doesn't even make sense to me. But as a woman, is there anything that, and also as a woman of color, have you had any like racial insensitivity at work? Do you find like you've had like gender stereotypes or anything like that that you've had to overcome?
I would actually say yes and no. So,
Okay.
in my position that I've been like growing in, I think I had a really great mentor. He was a white male, which was like very surprising to me. I went into this kind of nervous for exactly that. But he was actually the biggest mentor to kind of push me and kept telling me, like, you could do this on your own. You could, like, figure this out. And he was so quick to say, you know what, you need a managerial position name because you know things, you know your knowledge, you know your like what you're passionate about. And he straight up gave me the management position, and people all around me were like, let's just go to Muriel, right?
Yeah.
But then I would say where it was kind of crazy to me, is that there was women that are above me that felt weird that I was ranking up. And
Yeah.
that's actually where I started seeing a lot of issues because they were like, oh, why are you ranking up so quickly? Who's giving you all this information? Oh, well, you don't have any experience. And I went through all that stuff. And I think the issue is that I'm in engineering and I'm in design, and it was very difficult for women to even get there. So for the
Mm-hmm.
women that are in an older generation compared to me, they're kind of thinking as me as a threat because they had to work so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me now, with all the younger women that I'm working with, I want to change that. I want to empower them to do exactly what my mentor did and say,
Mm-hmm.
where do you want me to manage you? How do you want to learn? What are the next steps for you to do? Encourage them to be in a position of power and not feeling like they have to fight their way up to the top because you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been
Yeah.
saying from the start, like you have to just know how to speak, how to present yourself, and to also ask the questions and say what you want. And that's the biggest thing that I have actually seen. And surprisingly, I learned that from my mentor, who's like a white male. And I was
Yeah.
very surprised and I'm like super happy about that because to me, I'm like, that's amazing. Like, you would never think that, especially in a corporate world and in the tech
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
right? So that's where it's like a yes and no to me, which is
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
interesting because I
Yeah.
would say there's a lot of different stories a different way, but it like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it's hard to show, like this is what I need to do and this is how I'm going to manage it and why are
Yeah.
you trying to question me on what it is?
Yeah.
I know my stuff and I'm going to say
Yes.
what my stuff is.
Yes. I love it. Honestly, I'm so inspired by you.
Thanks.
No, I really am. It's just so nice to see like what you've been able to accomplish and in such a short period of time, let's be honest. And just being so young and so knowledgeable and just so dope. And the fact that you just continue to work on your craft and you're just like continue to explore the tech space because it's so easy to just kind of like rest on your laurels, stay where you are. It's nice and easy, you're comfortable, you're making money, but it's like to me you're such a powerhouse and I feel like
Thank
that's able to
you.
work with you is like super lucky. Seriously, you're awesome. You're awesome.
I I really appreciate it because there's days where, like you're trying so hard just to get that deadline and
Yeah.
it's frustrating, but to hear positivity and like also know that people do look up to me, I guess,
Yeah.
no doubt. But it's nice to be able to express it and kind of be able to talk about it because sometimes it is difficult to talk to other people within,
Yeah.
your organization because you can't overstep or you can't say things.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
it's nice to have a conversation.
Yeah, no, I think you're so dope. And I'm so glad I even got to find out all of this about you because it's like, I know you, I've seen you in passing, like we've hung out, things like that. But it's like, you don't really get a chance to really dig deep. Like, I'm not going to have a 40-minute conversation at a house party about your career? So it's like, it's so nice to
100%.
hear this. So, one question I always like to ask all of my guests is if you could gift a book to anyone, what would that be?
Oh, you're gonna hate me for this, but like my boyfriend hates me for this. Because this is me. I don't know what I do, but I don't read and I don't watch TV.
Nothing wrong with
I
that.
literally just live my life.
Yeah.
I can't sit still. But what I would say if I had to go back into my book memory, it's design of everyday things.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Love that
Yeah.
book. I've definitely read that book. Very, very good. And yeah, I find it's one of those things. If you're moving into tech design, product design, things like that, even product management, because I read that as a
Yes.
part of my product management journey. And yeah, I thought it was a very, very interesting book.
It's so interesting. Like, even just the first few chapters, like, I
Hmm.
wasn't one to read it from front to end, but I read it in parts, and I've also, like, practiced it a lot, right?
Hmm.
Like they say in the very beginning, people don't know how to use a door handle. So, how do
Yeah,
you use it? And that's
exactly.
exactly what I do with my life. Like, that's how I love to put myself in there and understand how my users work because nobody knows how to use a doorknob.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know?
No, you got to break it
So,
down, make it simple.
exactly. I read the book a long time ago, but it's the only book that I'm like, I actually appreciate this book in
Yeah.
many ways.
No, I love that. I love that. And as a designer, anything else that you would recommend? I know
Um,
you had written something down when I had sent you a questionnaire, so that's kind of what I'm trying to get out of you.
oh my God, what did I put?
Is a sketchbook.
Oh, yes, that is so true. I did write that. I'm like, I know I
Yeah.
wrote something funny, but yes, a
Yeah.
sketchbook.
And why would
Because
you why would you gift a sketchbook?
if I was
Tell
to
us.
gift a sketchbook, and actually, the funny story is I gifted my little cousin a sketchbook. Like she's out in the Philippines, and the one thing that I've told all of my cousins is that I won't send you money, but I'll go to the Philippines and I'll get whatever you need for school. And she kept
Nice.
begging me for a sketchbook, and I said, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? I'll buy you the sketchbook, but by the time I come back home, I need to see it full.
Oh.
And she actually filled up the whole sketchbook. She had
Oh.
drawings in it, she has ideas in it. And I was so proud of her because she actually got an award and also was able to showcase her artwork in Japan.
Oh, no
So
way.
to me, what I love about sketchbooks is it's a completely blank page. And
Yeah.
you could put whatever you want in it, your mind, your thoughts, and whether it's words or drawings or anything, it's completely open. And I think that's exactly, I guess, as a sum up, is that I don't really know where I'm going or if I regret anything in the past because every day is just a new page for me,
Oh, I
like
love
I'm just
that.
going ahead and like making myself what I can.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. You know what? I feel like that's a perfect place to end this episode. Muriel, honestly, thank you so, so much for coming on. I can't believe, like, I'm super, super inspired by you. I love seeing women in tech. I love seeing women killing it. I have
Thank
one
you.
other friend that is a product designer as well. And she basically, it was just so interesting seeing her journey. She lives in Sweden in Europe. So, really getting to see that, right, from like an industrial design perspective. Because when I talked to her, I was like, what's industrial design? You're going to school for industrial design. Like, what does that even mean? I was like so clueless to the whole thing. So to see like that first experience, my first and last experience actually, and then now
Yeah.
speaking to you is just like, yeah, it's so nice to see and really amazing and super inspiring. So thank you so much
Oh,
for coming
thank
on.
you. No
Yeah.
worries. It's my
Yeah.
pleasure.
So,
And yeah, congrats on doing this whole podcast. I'm so excited to see other
thank you.
episodes of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those that want to connect with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, which is Muriel Revisa Designs.
Awesome.
I have both a mix of interior designs and also all of my branding as well. So it's a whole hot mess in there. But yeah, you can find me on
Awesome.
Instagram.
I love it. I love it. I'll drop all of the details in the show notes as well for anyone that wants to connect with Muriel. And yeah, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Stella, and I look forward to speaking with you guys more next week. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the Technically Yes podcast. If you like today's episode, rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you would like to get in touch with me, reach out to me on Instagram at the Tech Yes Pod and find me and subscribe on YouTube by looking up the Technically Yes podcast. Thanks again and chat to you guys next week.